All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our State Library Lunch and Learn. Today, we welcome Don Helin. We're really excited to have Don after he was just at the American Library Association conference over the weekend. So now he's making his debut with a little Teams presentation here for the State Library. So during his time in the military, Don served at a number of stateside posts as well as overseas in Vietnam and Germany. He is the author of 8 thrillers that draw from his military experience, including 3 tours in the Pentagon. He writes for TheBurg, a community magazine based in Harrisburg. Don is the editor of the new anthology, Voices from the Pandemic. 2020 has brought changes in everyone's life. Read the memoirs of healthcare workers, educators, writers, and entertainers, people who have experienced loss, and a special group, elementary school students, to better understand what this period has meant to us all. His novel, Secret Assault, was selected as the best suspense and thriller at the 2015 Indie Book Awards. His novel, Long Walk Home, won a 5-star review at Reader's Favorite Awards, and his novel, Roof of the World, was a finalist in the 2020 Indie Book Awards. We're really excited to have Don today to discuss his writing technique and a little bit of background as far as how he became an author. So thank you very much, Don, for joining us.
Why, thank you, Ellen. It's great to be here. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank yourself and Nicole, first of all, for inviting me. But I will have to plead guilty to, I have done 3 years of Zooms, but I had never done Microsoft Teams. And also I plead guilty to be an Apple guy, and I didn't know how tough it was going to be to do that. But Nicole and you, Ellen, kind of led me through that. So I really appreciate your time and all your efforts. Let me just kind of go back a little bit. You mentioned my Army time. Yes, I spent almost 30 years in the Army. I had a variety of assignments here in the United States, as well as overseas in Germany and in Vietnam. But I think what helped me the most with my writing and creating my character is I had 3 tours, which is almost 10 years in the Pentagon. And believe me, there is a lot of I don't think people realize the Pentagon does have its own brand of politics and operations and command. So the experiences I got through that was really terrific. And I was able to box that in to my character. Then when I retired, I started looking around and I said, people aren't going to be really crazy about hiring about a guy that can pretty good at writing Army regulations. But so I said, what am I going to do as I move to the civilian world? And I saw an ad, which was so fortunate. It was for a travel writing symposium. The Washington Post was hosting it. And it was an 8-week program, and it was absolutely terrific. We had the editor of the Washington Post travel section and a couple of her top reporters. And I learned techniques that have served me well in everything I do. Because when you think about a travel article, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create an atmosphere in the article to make people want to come in to that particular place. And so those techniques are the same techniques you can use in writing a novel to make people want to read your novel and be excited about it and all that sort of stuff. And so this is what has helped me so much as I move from travel writing to starting to write fiction. And people, have asked me, why did you move from writing travel articles to writing fiction? And I think it was about 6 or 7 years. My wife and I had traveled a fair amount, and she's an artist and a pretty good photographer. So we were able to put together those skills and have a lot of fun doing it. But I really had a bug to write thrillers. And Some of you are probably aware of Penn Writers. That's the statewide writers group here in Pennsylvania. And I think we've got about 450 writers or something like that. And during the next couple, 3 years, I was able to learn from a lot of those writers. They had classes, they have conferences, and also 3 or 4 of the more published authors were terrific at being great mentors for me. And so I began to learn how to write a novel. And then I thought, hey, if I want to join, I want to be involved with writing thrillers, then I better join Thriller Fest. International Thriller Writers is home based in Washington. They have an annual in New York. Have an annual conference. But once I arrived there, I found out that they had what they call a debut author program. And this is where they take a group of new authors. And the year that I was in the debut author program, it's like a pledge class. There was almost I think it was 18 or 19 of us. And we've stayed in contact over time. And talk about lucky, the coordinator and my mentor there was Lee Childs, and who writes terrific thrillers. And so I I paid attention, listened, and learned a lot about how to write thrillers. Plus, as you all know, it's context too, getting to know people and all that sort of stuff. So that's what got me started on my writing. And I got the idea from Lee. He was so successful in his series character that I started out and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a series character or not. But we have a small team, and my hero is an Army colonel that works for the President's National Security Advisor. And he's got a small team that works for him. And that team I really enjoyed, and I kind of hated to let him go. And so I did do that, and my series character is Colonel Zach Kelly. And the other thing that I did after I wrote the first novel, I thought, what we want to do is make these people real. And so his wife ended up in jail because she took drugs and depressed her and all that sort of stuff. And so Zach's 19-year-old daughter came to live with him. So now he is the single parent of a 19-year-old teenager. And I don't know how many of you have 19-year-old teenage girls, but they have a certain amount of demanding of their dad, And so while Zach all of a sudden has a mission to go out and save the world, he gets a phone call and says, Dad, you're supposed to be here at 4 o'clock to coach my soccer team, So all of a sudden, he has all of the things that we have to put up with. The other thing he has is from his 3 tours in Iraq. He has a small case of PTSD. And so that's the other thing that Zach has to work with. And it also makes him people realize that this guy's a human being, and he's got all the other things, and people kind of associate with him. Now, the other thing is that to market my travel art and my novels, people said, well, you should do a blog. Well, I could never figure anything that people wanted to hear about in my blog. So I decided to go ahead and kept doing travel articles. So I would go out and do an article. I'd meet the people that I was doing the article on, and then I had readers in TheBurg, and they had a chance. Between your thrillers, it's like a year or so between one and the other. And during that time, it kind of kept me alive with people, with my readers, doing my articles and that sort of stuff. So I started when we moved from the Harrisburg area here to Lancaster. We moved into an over 55 community, and at the time I got here, I'd written 6 thrillers. One was Gettysburg, another one in Vietnam, another one in Tibet, another one in New York. So we had written a number of these. But when I walked in here and I started meeting people, these people were really interesting. They had terrific career stories. One of my friends, I said, tell me a little bit about yourself. He said, well, I grew up in East Germany. I said, oh, how did you get out? He said, well, when I was 18, my friend and I got just couldn't take it anymore. So they got a kayaking kit and they went down in their basement, turned the light off for about 6 months every night and practiced putting that kayak together. And one night when it was dark, they went out on the beach, put the kayak together and sailed off and were picked up by a Danish liner. Now you talk about a story that these guys have. But you know, you don't have to have these super duper stories to have fun writing a memoir. I'm teaching a class now, and so I've got a number of people. And one of the ladies in the class is in a wheelchair. And I said, what are you interested in doing? She said, you know, what I would like to be able to do is write some stories so my grandchildren know me when I wasn't in this wheelchair. And that's just as good a memoir as the one on the, you know, disappearing from East Germany. So we have all kinds of people who are interested in writing memoirs. And you have to ask, what is a memoir? And you know, and an anthology is about your total arc of your life. But on that total arc is a small niche, and that's what it's called, a memoir. It's a slice of life, and it opens from what I call a turning point. Something happens, a death of a loved one, a new job, traveling, or whatever, but a turning point, and it's like what I use, you know, in writing fiction. I always talk about the inciting incident, you know, maybe a bomb exploding or somebody gets shot. But the turning point is just something happens to us in life that makes us change. And so that's what you initiate the memoir. And so that's what we've been teaching. And then you do your research and you can start writing it from your tipping point. And what I always like to tell people is that what I try to do is help in the class understand creative nonfiction. Creative nonfiction is what we kind of use in writing novels. It's the use of various techniques. You know, when we write, we tend to write in scenes, and normally you end a scene with something happening, or you have something else, dialogue. You know, because a memoir can look like a textbook if you have just huge paragraphs. So you have dialogue to bring it alive. And so what we're trying to do in our memoir classes is to use creative nonfiction to bring this memoir alive, just like reading travel articles or just like reading novels. Now, we're all familiar with the pandemic challenges, what we've been going through for the last 2 to 2.5 years. Now, the pandemic really wasn't a huge deal for writers for our writing, because that's the challenge. That's what we do. You know, we're in lockdown, even though we don't realize it's a lockdown. But moving from that, once you complete your novel, you're supposed to go out and market it. And everything was closed down. I mean, there wasn't anything we could do. So my publisher really started a terrific program. She called it Zoom into Books. And what she did is she would have her authors, like I came in and I wrote taught a 6-week class, about 3-4 hours a week, on how to write a thriller. So people become to get to know you, and you become available, and then they know what you're doing, and while you're doing this, you market yourself, and so they then can go to the publisher and order a book. And we had done a thing where we had our little tabs for writing, and I would mail those to Kathy, so then she could go ahead and put them in the book. And so the Zoom into books really kept us afloat during the height of the pandemic. So what we did, Ellen mentioned my voices from the pandemic, and this was in February or March of 2000, when we were just stuck in the heights of it. And I started teaching a memoir class, and we did, I think, one a week for 6 weeks. And then my publisher put out a call for people to submit 1,500 word memoirs. And I think we got like almost 80 memoirs. And of course, we had to willow it down to a measurable amount, and we willowed it down to, there are 32 memoirs in the Voices from the Pandemic. And what this is we have singers, we have writers, we have healthcare personnel, we have educators, and believe it or not, we even have a bunch of 6th graders. Like one little girl was so concerned, they canceled her dance class, and she loved to go dancing. And so we put this together, and it actually became a best-selling book, Voices from the Pandemic. And it won a number of awards, and it went really well. And so we were very happy with that. And also, because, like our healthcare person, the title of her memoir was Tidal Wave. And you can just imagine what that memoir was about. Then we tried to lighten it up a little bit. We had one of my friends who's a big fly fisherman. He wrote a memoir on the fact that as a fly fisherman, it's not a big difference for him in fly fishing than it is from being locked down, because fly fishermen, they don't want anybody around them because they're going to catch them, and they have to wash their hands because they smell from fish. So we tried to lighten it a little bit, but it was very serious book. Now, continuing on in the pandemic time period, I kept writing, and the one that I'm really proud of is it's called Missing, and what it is it's a story of a third-party candidate who used artificial intelligence to cook the books and try to steal the election. Well, of course, this was a big deal during in 2020, because we completed and sent it out, and it was ready to go in September of 2020. And so were a lot of people trying to get that, and that was good timing for us. The other book that my 8th is called Twins. And that we have a series of French operatives who are working with militia groups, and they infiltrate the United States, and they hack in to a lot of the environmental systems, and then they have people who spread information. And I was really pleased with that, because Twins won an International Book Award, and then it also won, and the timing was absolutely perfect, is that it won a Best Beach Festival Award. So if you're looking for a terrific book to take to the beach, Twins is a good one. Now today we're going to talk a little bit about a little bit different from a lot of my thrillers, and that's a memoir. I taught so much on memoir, and we worked on memoir. I thought, maybe it's time that I look at writing a memoir. And it was very private, because my tipping point is not something I've told very many people about. But in 1984, I was diagnosed with T-cell lymphoma, which came, Army wouldn't admit it then, but we know now that it came from Agent Orange in Vietnam. And this happened to 500,000 or more vets. And what they did is they biopsied my lymph nodes and told me that because the lymph nodes were positive, I probably only had 6 years to live. And of course, I was newly remarried. I was on the promotion list to colonel. I had a great job in the Pentagon, and I couldn't believe that. And of course, I have kept a lot of that under wraps because I just didn't feel like that was the sort of thing I wanted to tell the world about. But then I figured it's a good memoir, and maybe people need to know that story. So I was at the National Cancer Institute, and I spent 2 years. What they did is they put us in two, of course, in two wings, and for 2 years we went through treatments, and they were able to prove through what we did there and all the people that were involved in that, that indeed Agent Orange is a presumptive cause for a lot of these things. And it led to the presumptive cause for vets that if you have T-cell lymphoma and you were in Vietnam during a designated period of time, then the VA presumes that that was caused, and therefore you can have certain benefits from that. Now, so we're trying to get that word out as best we can, because a lot of these vets don't realize it. And of course, sadly, an awful lot of them have died because they didn't know, they didn't get in, they didn't get the treatment. Then I realized at the end, one day the coordinator of the program called me in and she said, "Don, I don't know how to tell you this." I said, "Oh, what?" But she said, "You're the only one that survived that program." And I could not believe that. And I thought, well, she said, "I know you're a writer, and I hope that you will take the time to write the story of our what we did here and kind of celebrate all the people, because you get to be a group of friends, the helicopter pilots and the nurses and all that sort of stuff." So I've done my best to tell that story, and it was one I wasn't sure I wanted to tell, but I did. And I've got from Army regulations to novels, a writer's journey, and I was so pleased to receive an honorable mention in the London Book Festival for this story. So what I wanted to say is that all the books that I've talked about today is up on my website, www.donhelin.com, so you can get a copy, or it'll either go to my publisher or you can get it from Amazon, and it's ebooks as well as hard copy. And always the last question I usually get is, what's next? What's in the future? Well, I'm going to continue teaching memoir classes. We're getting ready to teach another class on Zoom with my publisher, and I'm teaching an in-person class here. Then I'm getting ready to research my next thriller, and I think that'll be somehow tied into Afghanistan. You know, the terrific drug problems they had over there and all the money people were trying to make off of drugs, and how can that work? And hopefully with the pandemic behind us, or we hope it's behind us, I'll be able to get out more. But I find that I've got to have passion for a book if I'm going to write it, and if I think people are going to like to read it. And I didn't have a passion right now for that Afghan story. But what I do is, I don't know how many of you have dogs. I had a beautiful Chesapeake Bay Retriever when I first met my wife. We had for 17 years, we had a little Westie who was just the light of our life. And then 11 years ago, my wife was out jogging in the country, and it was sleeting. And she saw this little critter dragging its back legs down the trail. And it was starved. And she kept following him. And she found out later that, the toenails on his back legs had been worn down because he kept dragging both those little legs behind him. And so she caught up with him and wrapped him up in a red blanket and brought him back to the house. And that's Max. And so we adopted Max, of course, and 11 years ago, he has just been an anchor for us, and he's so funny. And during the 2 years of the pandemic, you know, when I'd come in the door, Max is always glad to see me. He's always happy and all that sort of stuff. Well, I'm finding now that Max is 15 and a half, and he is walking down the road. We're having to give him medicines and stuff like that. And in the morning, Max is Max, but toward the end of the day, he gets into this, what they call a sundowner and all that sort of stuff. And I fully expect that one day I'll come in and Max won't be with us anymore. And I'm only hoping that I'll be here when something happens. But I thought, talk about passion. So I'm going to, for those people who have dogs, I'm going to document all the fun we had with Squaw and Murphy and Max, as well as, you know, when Murphy died, which was very hard, that was our second dog, we were traveling and we didn't necessarily want to get another dog. So we had a good friend that said, well, you know what you ought to do is join Susquehanna Service Dogs. And you can have your dog hit without having the responsibility of caring for one all the time. So we've been active with service dogs for probably 7 years now and doing what's called public training, where we take them around. So those guys have to behave in the public. So I'm trying to put all this stuff together, and I think I'll title it "Do All Dogs Go to Heaven?" because I have the emotion for it, and I think it'll be a pretty good story. Well, Alan, I appreciate again your hospitality, and certainly both of you and Nicole taking the time to help me. And now I've learned a new skill thanks to you guys. And if Microsoft, I won't be out sucking my thumb trying to, if I find out that I'm supposed to be on Microsoft Teams again, because you guys have helped me. So I thank you very much for that. And if there's any questions, I would be more than happy to take them.
Sure. Well, I have a couple questions actually that were posed to you from our registration form.
Okay.
So let me begin with one of those. Where can we obtain a copy of the Voices from the Pandemic anthology?
Yes. Right now, if you go to my website, and it's donhelin.com, you'll see it's the lead book because it's the latest book to come out. And you can get it at in Amazon, or if you can send to my publisher, Headline Books, they have it there. So it's certainly readily available.
Are you working with any writing groups, virtually or in person now?
Writing groups?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Yes. We've been doing it through Zoom for quite a while. But I think we will now begin as things open up. And that reminds me, I have to mention something that was a real pride that we had when we were back in, some of you know Perry County, which is a very country county, and they have a arts council there. And we put together under the arts council what we called a novel idea. And I had 7 of my friends who are published authors. And we invited people to come in, and I forget, it was a couple $100 or something like that for a semester. And during that period of time, they would get teaching on how to write a book. You know, we had some of them are really good, and each one Saturday a month for a year, they would come in and we would teach a different element of writing. And now I'm so pleased to find out that some of these are now published and have gone on to do very well. Now, when I moved from Perry County to Lancaster, we dissolved that a novel idea, but it's such a great idea. I'm thinking of starting it again here.
Yeah, I know that we were introduced to you through Sandy Nork, who was a member of the Penn Writers group. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they seem
and
to
Sandy
very
was in
active.
right. Sandy was in our class, and that got her going. And now she's got 2 books,
Yeah,
and she's
amazing.
doing very well. So, and so it's helped so many people because,
Mhm.
writing's like anything else. It's hard to do till you know how to do it, and you just, the other thing that helped, we would have each of the class, we could have up to 20. So I found that over the period of a year, they would work together. They would trade manuscripts, and because how important this is in critiquing. So that's, I'm very proud of that. And I think over the period of the 5 years, I think it was either 4 or 5 years, we had 75 people graduate from a novel idea.
That's cool. Do you have a like a certain technique as far as like do you write an hour a day, or do you have some sort of schedule?
Yeah, I don't do well with schedules, and I'll tell you why. Because before the pandemic, it was different. Because I might write 2 or 3 days, but then we're on, like this past weekend, I was up in Washington and had so much fun at the American Library Conference, and we'll be going to different conferences now. So during that period of time, I don't do a lot of actual drafting. And I normally have, when I really get going, I have 3 books in the hopper. One is I'm just drafting. A second one, I'm doing a marketing. And then I have a full sales thing going on, the third one. So I might, and I think that I'm, as you may have been able to tell, I'm kind of a social creature. So locking myself up in the house doesn't do me very well. So I mix and match, and toward the end, as people say, writing is rewriting. And once you finish the draft, then you end up. I'm fortunate. I have 3 or 4 readers who help me, and then I help them. We kind of trade and stuff like that. So it depends where the different books are. I'll have one that a reader's looking at for me. At the same time, another one is out for sales. So and that's mixing and matching, I think, is what keeps me happy.
Do you have a favorite travel spot from all of your travel writing?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. Because of the pandemic. Um, I think the one that we did, I didn't write about because was South Africa and all the animals and all that. But here is Hills Creek State Park. I don't know if you've ever heard. It's up by the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania, and Elaine and I normally go up there 2 or 3 times a year because it's like 4.5, 5 hours up, and they have, plus they have 2 cabins, one right on the edge of the woods that allow dogs, and of course we can't go anyplace without Max. So that here in Pennsylvania is, and we're both outdoor people, and but from my travel, there's so many wonderful things. There's the Wolf Sanctuary here in Lancaster. I could just go on and on. But I think my favorite spot right now has got to be Hills Creek State Park.
Great. Yeah, I've been up there, past
Have you?
through the Grand Canyon and hiking around a little bit, but we haven't spent the night. So.
Well, it's really nice. You're out in the middle of the woods, but there's a lot to be said for being in the middle of the woods and having a microwave and air conditioning. So that's not all bad.
Yeah, you're not roughing it too much.
No. Well, after 30 years in the Army, I learned that,
yeah.
I'm not crazy about sleeping on the ground anymore. I been there, done that, So.
Great. Okay. Where and how are you teaching classes right now? Are they all online?
Right. Right now they're online on Zoom, and I think if you go to www.headlinebooks, that's my publisher.com, and then there's a click, Zoom into books. And we're not doing one right now because we spent a lot of time getting ready for the ALA. But I know my publisher's getting ready to crank that up again. And we'll be doing, um, uh, and she has like 130 authors, and she brings in a wide variety of, a lot of children's book authors, and suspense mystery, and all different kinds. And we teach memoir also. So I would say that, and then I may go back to my roots of Perry County Council of the Arts in Newport, and teach memoir there again. We've been talking about doing that.
And Kathy had a question in the chat about your plans for the next book. Is that your dog
Yeah,
memoir book that you were writing
yeah.
about?
That's because I was all set to write thriller number 9, because I really like. It's funny how you these people grow with you. In my first book, there's a Irish medium, Shelia, who helps Zach, and then I was on book 2 and 3, and I got a number of questions. Whatever happened to Shelia? So she comes back in book 4, and that's kind of the fun thing about having these characters. You get to know them, you get to like them, and they're fun working with. And so I was thinking about that thriller number 9, and then all of a sudden I said, because I'll have to admit it's hard for me to think about losing a dog, and for the dog people out there, I'm sure you understand that. And so I just think, this is going to help me. It's almost like a little therapy as I write. And so I've had more fun. I've started with Murphy, who is a little Westie. And as you probably know, Westies are real tigers. And she used to kayak with us, and she used to ride bikes with us, and she used to do all that stuff. She did funny stuff. So we've captured a lot of that. And then, of course, Max was a therapy dog. And yeah, well, here's one that interests you for a moment. Elaine trained him to be a therapy, my wife, and we would take him into libraries and to help with reading. And this little girl would wanted Max, and she looked at my wife and she said, "Is he sleeping?" And she said, "No, no, no, he's just resting his eyes." And then the next week, the little girl came in again, and she said, "I've got a new book." I didn't want Max to be bored with listening to the same book again, So,
Oh,
so
that's great.
those are stories that are just a lot of fun. So,
I love it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. I love reading these about pets. We were at a festival over the weekend, and there was a special needs dog that sort of sounds like maybe he was in the same condition as Max, but he was getting so much attention and love. Everybody was sort of lined up to pet him.
yeah.
It was
Well, you're absolutely right.
yeah,
And that,
he was in
what
his
we've found is working through Susquehanna service dogs, what those dogs can do is just absolutely incredible, and the service they provide to people. So we may go back. We're not helping right now because we've been kind of tied down, but I'm not sure if we're going to get back into it or not. But I think the service dog family is an incredible operation.
well. Are there any other questions from the audience here? I don't see any more in the chat. But thank you very much for spending your lunchtime talking to our audience of state employees and your loyal fans.
Well, I have a real love for librarians, because they have been so helpful to me, and I know in Harrisburg, before we moved, there were 3 or 4 libraries, and every time I'd get a new book out, hey, come on in, and librarians are so thoughtful. So I have a special place for librarians, and so when I saw this opportunity, I thought this would be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I look forward to reading your next book, Dawn. And if anybody wants a book, remember to check out Mr. Hyland's website, or you can find the book at Amazon or the other
Good.
places you mentioned, or check it out from your local library because we have a copy here too. So
Sure.
thanks everyone.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Ellen
Yeah,
and Nicole. I appreciate your time.
thank you.